A majority for the Liberals, as close as it gets.
Variety of many things that have allowed me to really reflect on this, and I'm very thankful to be so warmly welcomed.
2 seats. That's how close the Liberal government is right now to a majority in Parliament. 2 seats. And they just got a whole lot closer because this week a Nunavut MP walked out of the NDP caucus room, crossed the aisle and sat down with the Liberals. Her name is Lori Idlout, and her decision sent shockwaves through Parliament that we are still feeling. We're talking about floor crossing, one of the most controversial, most debated, and honestly most fascinating moves a politician can make in a democracy. Is it courageous? Is it betrayal? Is it democratic? We are going to answer all of that today. We are also going to talk about what this means for the NDP, a party that's now...
Right now, Canada needs the NDP more than any other time in our history. I can tell you that. Canadians are about to learn.
Down to 6 seats and facing some very uncomfortable questions about its own future. We are going to walk through the 3 by-elections on April 13th that could literally determine whether Canada has a majority government. I'm your host. Welcome to Canadian Politics Unplugged, where we cut through the noise and tell you what's actually happening. No spin, no party cheerleading, just straight talk for Canadians who give it down. Let's get into it.
I'm very honored to welcome Lori Idlout to our caucus. It is a great pleasure. One of Canada's greatest constituency MPs. You represent a riding that is the size of Mexico, and very down to earth, and we've had conversations about what we can do both large and small.
Before we get into this, what just happened, let's make sure we're all on the same page, because if you're newer to Canadian politics, you may be wondering what exactly is floor crossing. The name comes from the physical layout of the House of Commons. The governing party sits on one side of the chamber, the opposition sits on the other. The literal floor of the House separates them. When a member of parliament switches parties, they cross that floor. They physically move from one of the side to the other. Now, here's the part that surprises a lot of people. It's completely legal. There's no rule in Canada that says an MP has to stay in the party they were elected under. Once you're elected to parliament, you serve as an individual representative to your riding. You can sit as an independent, you can join another party, you can do it the day after the election if you want. And technically, no rules broken. Does that make it right? That is a different conversation, and we are going to have it. First, let's look at the history, because this is not new. Since Confederation in 1867, more than 300 members of parliament have crossed the floor. 300. This has been a feature, some might say a bug, of Canadian democracy for as long as we have had one. The very first floor crosser, a Nova Scotian MP named Stuart Campbell in 1868. Just 1 year after Confederation. He left the anti-Confederate to join Sir John A. Macdonald's Liberal Conservatives. He was later pelted with eggs at a social occasion, which honestly feels like a very Canadian response. But let's fast forward to more recent history, because some of these stories are wild. In 2003, Scott Bryson, progressive Conservative MP, crossed to the Liberals just days after the PC party merged with the Canadian Alliance to form the modern Conservative Party. He said the new party didn't reflect his values. He went on to become Canada's first openly gay federal cabinet minister. That's a floor crossing that genuinely changed the trajectory of someone's career and the country. In 2005, Linda Stornak, she had actually run for the leadership of the new Conservative Party in 2004. A year later, she crossed to the Liberals. She said her leader at the time wasn't sensitive to the needs of all parts of Canada. Timing was politically explosive. The Liberals were in a confidence vote at that time, and her switch helped them survive it. In 2006, David Emerson, he won a federal election as a Liberal on the Friday. 2 weeks later, he was sitting in Stephen Harper's Conservative cabinet as a minister. 2 weeks. The backlash was massive. The ethics commissioner investigated. No rules were found broken, but the public outrage was real. In 2008, Leona Alsev went the other direction, from the Liberals to the Conservatives. In 2021, Janica Atwin went from the Greens to the Liberals. And now, in the past 4 months alone, 4 MPs have crossed the floor to join the Liberals. 4 in 4 months. That kind of clustering is unusual, and it tells a story about the political moment we are in. Quick break. If you're finding this useful, subscribe right now. New episodes every Monday. Okay, Let's talk about Lori. Let's talk about her story. So, who is Lori? And why does her decision matter beyond just the seat count? Lori Idlout is this member of parliament for Nunavut, and I want to pause on that for a second because Nunavut is not like any other riding in this country. It is the largest federal electoral district in Canada by land area. We're talking about a territory of over 2 million square kilometers, larger than Western Europe, with a population of just around 40,000 people, the majority of whom are Inuit. Being the MP for Nunavut is not a normal political job. Your constituents are spread across some of the most remote communities on the planet. Infrastructure's challenges are enormous. The cost of living is staggering. Basic groceries can cost 3 or 4 times what they cost in southern Canada. Issues around housing, food security, mental health, and Arctic sovereignty are not abstract policy debate. They are daily lived realities for the people she represents. Idlout has been a passionate advocate for her constituents since she was elected as an NDP MP. She's vocal, she's shown up, and by most accounts, from all sides of the political spectrum, she's been a strong constituency MP. Even the Prime Minister said that when welcoming her to the Liberal caucus.
Represent a riding that is the size of Mexico, and very down to earth, and we've had conversations about what we can do both large and small.
So why did she leave? In her own words, resources. She said it takes so much more resources just to be heard as a part of a small opposition party, especially one now down to 6 seats. And she said she needed to show her people that she was willing to do what it takes to get more of her territory. She said she received feedback from her constituents and her family telling her this is a crucial moment for Nunavut and for Canada. With the new threats at Arctic sovereignty, with pressures on the well-being of northern communities, she felt that being a part of a governing party gave her a better shot at actually delivering. Here's the part that made this even more complicated. Just last Thursday, less than a week before she announced the crossing, she appeared at an Ottawa rally for NDP leadership candidate Byelection. She was also a vocal critic of the Carney government right up until she joined it. That's not a knock on her politics. Politics is complicated. People change their mind, circumstances change, but it does illustrate why floor crossing generates such strong reactions, especially from the people who work hard to get her elected as an NDP MP. She is actually the 4th MP to cross the floor to the Liberals since last spring election. 4 in about 4 months. Let's walk through all of them, because each story is different and together they tell a bigger story about Canadian politics right now. Let's go each one quickly. Chris from Nova Scotia, November 2025, the first to go, a long-serving Conservative MP who crossed to the Liberals. He told reporters that when other MPs were considering the same move, he actually reached out to offer support and advice on handling the kickback and uncomfortable conversations that came with crossing the aisle. That's someone who had clearly thought this through and is comfortable with his decision. Michael Ma, Ontario, December 2025, the second, an Ontario Conservative who joined the Liberals just before Christmas. His move added fuel to what was becoming a pattern. Matthew on Rocks, Alberta, February 2026. Now this one is notable because it came from Alberta.
I reached out to the Prime Minister's office and will be joining his caucus tonight.
Conservatives for the government. We're going to dig into what it all means.
Quite honestly, it was the speech in Davos where you took everything head on, and I think for me that's where a lot of the world changed. I think it opened a lot of eyes for Canadians, Albertans, Edmontonians, just how serious this national unity crisis truly is. And it's for me, it felt disingenuine and quite simply wrong to be sitting on the sidelines anymore. So I reached out to the Prime Minister's office and will be joining his caucus.
The Conservatives' home turf. An Alberta MP leaving for the Liberals is the kind of move that gets attention and raises questions about what's happening inside the Conservative caucus. And then Lori, the first to come from outside the Conservative, the first NDP MP to join Carney's Liberal, which changes the political optics considerably. This isn't just Conservative drifting to the center. This is the Liberals pulling from the left as well. When you look at these 4 moves together, a picture starts to emerge. The Liberals under Carney are positioning themselves as a big tent party, drawing support from both the right and the left. Liberal MP Karina Gold said exactly that on her way into the caucus, calling it extraordinary extraordinary and a sign that Liberals are a party that draws from across the political spectrum. The Conservatives naturally are calling it something else entirely. Their leader called it backroom deals to seize a majority that voters rejected. That's a political frame. We'll look at whether it holds up. Halfway through, subscribe if you haven't. Every Monday right here. Now, the math. How close is the majority? Let's get into the numbers because the math here is genuinely interesting and there are some details that most coverage glosses over. The House of Commons has 338 seats. A majority government means you control 170 seats or more. It's the point where you have more seats than all opposition parties combined. Right now, after Lori's crossing, the Liberals' seat count sits at 107. The Conservatives have 141. The Bloc has 22. The NDP has 6. The Green have 1. So the Liberals are at exactly 170. Majority territory, technically. But this is important. Political analyst Eric puts it very well when he said 172 is not a magic number. Because even with a razor-thin majority, the Liberals have a real procedural problem. Here's the issue. When Parliament is working in committees, which is where a lot of actual work is governing happens, where bills get examined, where witnesses gets called, those committees are currently structured for a minority parliament, meaning the opposition parties combined control the committee's agenda. That's by design in a minority situation. If the Liberal want to change that, to restructure committees so the governing party controls the agenda, they need a majority vote in the full house to do it. And here's where it gets specific. To force that change, you need at least 173 Liberal MPs. Why 173 and not 170? Because the House Speaker, who is himself a Liberal MP, Francis, does not cast a vote in this situation. He only votes to break a tie and he's expected to act as an impartial figure. So for all practical purposes, the Liberal have only 169 voting members right now. What this means practically is this: even if the Liberals win all the 3 by-election and hit 173 seats, they only have 172 voting members. They would still be operating on the absolute thinnest possible majority. One sick MP, one defection, one anything, and they're back to minority dynamics. That's not necessarily a crisis. The government have operated on this thin majorities before, but it does mean that Liberals can't govern with arrogance. Every vote matters, every relationship matters, and it keeps the pressure on. So 3 by-elections on April 13th, 1 month from now. Let's break down each one because they're not all the same. The first 2 are in the Toronto area. Both were triggered by the resignations of former cabinet ministers Chrystia Freeland and Bill Blair. These are considered safe Liberal seats, Toronto riding with strong Liberal histories. Barring something very unusual, the Liberals are expected to win both of these. Winning those 2 puts the Liberals at 172 seats, a majority, the thinnest possible one, but still a majority. Then there's the third. And this one is completely different. Terrebonne, a Montreal area riding, and the story of how this by-election came to be is actually remarkable. The Liberals won the original election in Terrebonne by 1 vote, 1 single vote. The riding was so close that the result was challenged and it went all the way to the Supreme Court of Canada. Last month, the Supreme Court annulled the result, meaning it declared the original election void and ordered a new by-election. Here's why this matters even more. Terrebonne was previously a Bloc stronghold. This is not a safe Liberal seat. This is a genuine 3-way race, or at a minimum a tight 2-way battle. In a Montreal area riding where the Bloc has roots and stakes are enormous. Winning Terrebonne would give the Liberals 173 seats, 3 voting Liberals on top of the Speaker. That's the number they actually need to change committee structures and truly govern with the majority control. It's a functionally significant difference. Political consultant Eric said that government is pulling out all the stops for Terrebonne. Ministers will be in Montreal. The Prime Minister himself is expected to knock doors there. The Liberal Party convention is happening in Montreal the day before the by-election. So the entire party machine will be in the neighborhood. For the Liberals, winning all 3 is a dream scenario. Winning 2 of the 3, likely the Toronto seats, give them the majority. Losing Terrebonne, keep them in that thin, procedurally complicated zone. And losing any of the Toronto seats, that would be a political earthquake. There are also questions about more departures on the horizon. One Toronto Liberal MP has declared his intention to run for provincial politics. One Montreal NDP MP is reportedly considering the same. More vacancies could mean more by-election, and each one is an opportunity or a risk. I want to spend some time on the NDP story because I think it's being underreported, and it matters for Canadian democracy. The NDP is now down to 6 seats. Sick. Let that sink in. A party that has been a fixture of Canadian federal politics over 60 years, a party that brought us universal healthcare, labor rights, pension reforms, and some of the most consequential social policies in Canadian history, and is now a 6-seat caucus. They don't even have official party status in the House of Commons. To qualify for that, you need 12 seats. Official party status gets you more resources, more speaking time, more committee seats, more staff supports. Without it, the NDP is operating on a much smaller playing field. And now they've just lost one of their most prominent MPs.
Right now, Canada needs the NDP more than any other time in our history. I can tell you that. Canadians are about to learn that.
To the Liberals, not to retirement, not to a defeat at the polls, to the party they have spent decades defining themselves against. The reaction inside the NDP on Wednesday was raw. One insider called it a slap in the face. Anne McGrath, who was a senior figure in the party, talked about a sense of betrayal for all the volunteers, members, and workers who poured their energy into getting Lori elected.
I know how hard people work to get these guys elected. And so what I feel like when I look at what happened with Lori is that her supporters, the members of the NDP, the volunteers, her riding association, what a huge betrayal this is to them. And not just her riding association, which I think is massive, but also I think people across the country, New Democrats across the country, were very excited by her.
That's real. That's not a spin. When you knock on doors for months and make calls and believe in someone, and then that person joins the other team, it stings. Anyone who's been involved in any kind of team or organization can understand that. But here's where the conversation gets really serious. Some NDP insiders aren't just calling this as a temporary setback. They're calling it as a legitimacy crisis. NDP organizer James Allaire said the party needs to go through serious reflection and that the next leader will have to prove the NDP deserves to exist. That is a remarkable thing for a party organization to say publicly. Now that we are down, not that we need to rebuild, but that we need to prove we deserve to exist. Is he right? Let's think about this seriously. The argument that the NDP is in existential trouble goes like this. In a polarized political environment, voters increasingly feel pressure to choose between two camps. In Canada's case, the Liberals and the Conservatives. The NDPs get squeezed from both the sides. Liberal-leaning voters abandon them when they feel the stakes are too high to waste a vote on a third party. Conservatives-leaning workers who might have once voted for NDP are shifting to the right. And without a clear path to power, recruiting top candidates and raising money becomes harder and harder. The counter argument, and it's a real one, is that NDP has been in this position before and bounced back. Jack Layton led them from 19 seats in 2008 to 103 seats and official opposition status in 2011. That's the single biggest seat gain in the history of Canadian politics by any party in a single election. The NDP knows how to rebuild. They also have a leadership race underway right now. Former NDP MP Nathan Cullen tried to downplay Lori's exit by pointing to the leadership race energy, saying the money raised and the engagement in the race is actually pretty good. The next leader's job is to turn that energy into something that looks like a future. Here's the fundamental tension. The NDP's reason for being is to push Canadian politics to the left, to advocate for workers, for healthcare, for social programs. In a world where the Liberals are already positioning themselves as a left-of-center, big tent governing party, what is the NDP's distinct space? That's the question the next leader needs to answer convincingly. Let's tackle the question that I know is sitting in the back of a lot of your minds. Is floor crossing democratic? Is it fair? Should it be allowed? I'm going to give you both sides of this argument because they're both legitimate And then I want you to tell me where you land in the comments. The argument against floor crossing goes like this. When voters go to the polls, they are largely voting for a party and a platform, not just an individual. Most people, when they put their X next to a name, are thinking about which party they want to govern. They're thinking about the party's leader, its policies, its values. So when an MP takes that vote and uses it to prop up a different party, one the voter actively chooses not to support, they are overriding the democratic intent of the ballot. The NDP's interim leader, Don Davis, made this argument explicitly on Wednesday. He said the decision of voters at the ballot box is a sacred trust, and if an MP wants to override that decision, they should go back to the voters and get a renewed mandate. Resign. Run a by-election under your new banner. Let the people decide. That's a principled position, and it has real democratic logic behind it.
And if a member of parliament wants to override that decision, we believe they must go back to the voters and make that case to them and receive a renewed mandate.
The argument for floor crossing, or at least for its legal permissibility, goes like this. In Canada's system, voters elect individuals, not parties. An MP's job is to represent their constituents, all of them, including those who didn't vote for them, if an MP genuinely believes they can better serve their riding by sitting with a different caucus. Is it not more democratic for them to do what serves their constituents rather than what serves their party? Lori made this argument directly. He said she felt she was otherwise betraying her constituents by staying in a 6-seat caucus that couldn't deliver for Nunavut. Liberal MP Carney echoed the principle, saying it's ultimately incumbent on floor crossers to explain their decisions to constituents and be accountable to them. There's also a practical argument. Banning floor crossing outright could create other problems. What happens when a party does something deeply wrong? Should an MP be forced to stay? What if the party you were elected under ceases to exist? Like what happened to the Progressive Conservatives in 2003. Different countries handle this differently. In some parliamentary systems, an MP who crosses the floor automatically loses their seat and triggers a by-election. In Canada, we have never gone that route. Here's what I would say. I think this is one of those questions where both sides have legitimate points, and where the answer might depend on the specific circumstances. A floor crossing that reflects genuine constituent needs, explained openly and transparently, is different from one that smells like a backroom deal for personal gain. Context matters, transparency matters, and ultimately voters get the last vote at the next election. Okay, let's bring this home. You might be thinking seat counts, committee structures, by-elections. What does any of this have to do with your actual life? Here's the connection. Whether Canada has a minority or a majority government directly affects how fast and how boldly the government can make move on things that affect you. The short version, a more stable majority government, means the Liberals can move faster on their agenda. Housing, healthcare, trade diversification, defense spending. Whether you agree with that agenda is a separate question, but stability in government generally means faster, bolder policy action. And the NDP's weakening matters too, because for decades the NDP has acted as the conscience of parliament, pushing liberal governments for the left on healthcare, social programs and labor rights. A weaker NDP means less of that pressure. That has real policy consequences. We'll be watching all of this, and the by-elections on the April 13th, the NDP leadership race, any more floor crossing right here every Monday. This is your Canadian politics briefing for this Monday. We cover the history of floor crossing in Canada, from the guy who got pelted with eggs in 1868 to the 4 MPs who got crossed in the past 4 months. We went deep on Lori's story and why Nunavut's perspective matters. We looked at the political math, 3 by-elections on April 13th, the NDP's existential moment, and the big philosophical question about whether floor crossing is even democratic. I really want to hear from you on this one. Drop a comment. Tell me, do you think floor crossing should be allowed? Should Lori have resigned and run a by-election as a Liberal? Is the NDP finished, or do they have a comeback in them? These are genuinely interesting questions, and I read every comment. If this was useful, share it. Send it to someone who's been following this story. Post it somewhere. The more Canadians who actually understand what's happening in our parliament, the better. Subscribe, hit the notification bell, and I'll see you next Monday. I'm your host, Vig. This is your Canadian Politics Unplugged. And as always, everything you just watched is for information and entertainment purposes only. Do your own research, check the sources. See you Monday.